Writing a personal statement is stressful. So how did I go from an empty Word document like this to 5 offers from Cambridge, Bath, St Andrews, UCL and Durham to study psychology? If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. If you're new, my name's Francis. I'm a graduate of Psychological and Behavioural Sciences at Emmanuel College, Cambridge. I'm currently doing a master's at UCL and I'm about to start a clinical psychology doctorate at Oxford. So it's fair to say I've written quite a few academic personal statements. In this video, I'm going to break down, at great embarrassment to myself, my undergraduate UCAS personal statement, explaining section by section why I think it went down well with the mysterious admissions people. And because no personal statement is perfect, anything I'd change looking back to make it even better. Overall, I divided my personal statement into introduction, which took up 24% of the characters, academic experience in reading, which was 39%, work experience, 13%, and extracurricular and conclusion, 24%. Feel free to navigate around the video using the timestamps in the description. And also please don't copy this because we might both be screwed. Thanks. Let's kick off with the introduction. The introduction needs to answer the simple question, why? Why do you want to do this subject? The way I approached this was to start by talking about the importance of my subject, psychology, in the modern world. Much like the start of a Mr. Beast video, your first sentence needs to grab the reader's attention. So mine was, the human race is the creator of its own most pressing issues. Now, I elaborate on this in the next few sentences, but I think a shorter sentence to begin with is more impactful and it can stand out more, providing it's like making an interesting point, which I think this one is. So I move on to saying, wealth distribution, political tension, and climate change. They ultimately all stem from the human mind. I remember when I wrote this 6 years ago now, I literally just Googled firstly, reasons to study psychology, and then secondly, what are the biggest issues in the world today? These are 3 of the top 10. Probably fair to say they remain quite relevant issues unless you don't believe in climate change. But if you don't believe in climate change, then you must think that the mass belief in climate change is an interesting psychological issue. And therefore, this sentence also works if you are a climate change denier. So really appealing to every kind of admissions tutor here. As such, if we are to ensure similar societal problems do not arise in the future, we need to understand this mind. Psychology's importance is paramount. We live in a culture egotistically driven by status, likes on Facebook, that's a throwback, and material possessions, a culture addicted to the internet, Netflix, and pornography, as well as approval, worrying, and stress. I was in my Buddhist phase here, so that's why I'm talking about like renouncing material possessions and addiction to worrying and stress. As long as this continues, we are not going to be able to mentally handle the comparatively huge technological progress being made, for example, in artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, on an exponential basis. All right, I'm a little bit more embarrassed by these last few sentences, but psychology is so pervasive in all of the main issues that society faces today. I would probably have worded this sentence differently, the one about mentally handling the huge technological progress. I'd have probably said, and maybe someone can express this better than me and put it in their own personal statement, society is evolving at such a rapid rate. No matter how advanced we get with technology, the human brain that interacts with all this technology is the same one that was in caveman tribes tens of thousands of years ago. And then I put a couple of sentences talking about like personal experiences to me that drew me to psychology, which I'm not going to share. And they're also not like remarkable sentences. They're not the secret to me getting offers. But I would say that if you do have a personal motivation to do your subject, or maybe you've had a particular experience that's like personal to you, that's drawing you to your subject, now is the time to get that down on paper. As an admissions tutor, you want to see whether a candidate understands the place of your subject in the world, but also are they personally motivated to do this subject? You could also have your personal motivation at the top of the paragraph, and then the understanding of the subject's importance below that. But then I guess you can easily get drawn into the stereotypical opening sentence of, ever since I was a child, I was always fascinated by biochemical engineering. That's why I went for putting the broader motivations at the top to be a little bit different. Moving on to the academic experience and reading section. I didn't do psychology A-level, even though I was applying for psychology. I did philosophy, maths and further maths and computing. If I did psychology, I would have talked about it here, but instead I tried to think what, if anything, from my current A-levels is relevant to psychology. During my philosophy AS, studying theories of perception fascinated me. It made me ponder how the mind filters sensory input from the external world in perception, and the possibility that all there actually is are minds and their ideas. Again, we're on a bit of a hashtag deep theme, which is the question of whether there is an external world in philosophy. Obviously, psychology isn't going to be able to answer that, but The fact we studied minds in philosophy made me essentially have to write this down because maths and further maths, you're not going to get much out of that for psychology. I took it one sentence talking about theories of mind. And then the next one, this year, my A2 explores the mind-body problem, how mental phenomena and the physical brain are connected, an already intriguing topic to which psychology could add a scientific perspective. I've essentially said to them, I know this important theory from philosophy A-level. How does a physical brain, a collection of atoms, give rise to a kind of first-person experience of emotions, like the sense there is a you in a body? I also want to build on that knowledge through doing a psychology degree. I've also mentioned the EPQ, the Extended Project Qualification. To further my academic exposure to psychology, I'm doing an EPQ about the psychological effects of imprisonment, hoping to ascertain whether it is a feel-good system for those outside that does not genuinely benefit those kept within. I believe the freedom I have in researching this, as well as the extra workload of further maths, will stand me in good stead for university work. So I've got further maths in there, which I didn't even realise. Just the extra workload of doing that is a nice point to mention. The EPQ shows that, again, I've taken on extra workload, but also I've explored my interest in psychology before university. I don't need university to confirm to me whether I'm interested in it. Like, I'm enjoying it now. You mentioned the EPQ on UCAS, but here's a chance to kind of elaborate on what it is. I haven't mentioned computing A-level, but I talked about artificial intelligence in the introduction, so that's fine. Moving on to reading. Outside of school, reading Susan Cain's Quiet has opened my eyes to the pervasive extrovert ideal of Western culture and how it's potentially unnecessary, given how similarly and sometimes better introverts perform at work. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman has made me also think about the extent to which society runs on the biased decision-making mechanisms inside our heads. So for a lot of degrees, you can find a recommended reading list on their website, which will be stuff that they recommend you read before starting the course. I looked up the reading list for PBS at Cambridge. I tried a couple of books. The most interesting one to me was called Thinking Fast and Slow, which now I realise is apparently the book that everyone writes on their psychology personal statement. And so it's kind of recommended to not use it. But then if that's being recommended to enough people, that means that you can use it and stand out again. The other book, Quiet, that wasn't on a reading list that I guess I've taken two approaches. One, what do they want to hear in terms of reading? Have you read stuff on their reading lists and therefore know stuff that's like relevant to the courses you're going to study? But then also, what personally interests you about your subject? Without anyone telling you to read a particular book, what would you read? And so that's why I led with Quiet in this paragraph. At a Cambridge University event, we carried out a study of one example, the framing effect, finding the same remarkable tendency to exaggerate the impact of loss over gain in one of our two scenarios. This raised the issue of reproducibility in psychological studies, and I was surprised to learn one inquiry testing this barely had a 50% success rate. If you'd done anything like, I think it's called Sutton Trust or UNIC at Oxford, I don't know if they're still doing that. If you've been to like a prestigious university event, then drop that name in. Because with a lot of things like job applications, they're going to try and anonymize it as much as possible to reduce bias. So what we want to do is reinsert bias back in there. Some name drop prestigious unis to give them a sense of this person is associated with these institutions. The taster event I did, I applied to do the Sutton Trust thing, which is like 4 days staying at the uni, but I didn't get onto that. I got to this like taster, which is called Experience Psychological and Behavioural Sciences. What we did was we ran an experiment from Thinking Fast and Slow, talking about the framing effect. That's why I put Thinking Fast and Slow in as well, because I actually had an experience relating to it outside of reading the book. And then one of those other things that's definitely worth mentioning in a psychology personal statement, a lot of the literature doesn't replicate. The particular study here, it tried to replicate a lot of psychological studies and was successful in about a third of them. Very damning indictment for psychology. This entire paragraph has been about what have I done beyond what school can offer me to explore my subject. Next up is work experience. I think it's one thing to just say you're passionate about your subject, but what I've tried to do in my personal statement is just not even to say that I'm passionate, but like just to give lots of different examples of where I've shown I've been passionate about the subject. To understand what a psychology career could offer, I gained work experience in the Employee Health and Wellbeing Department at my local hospital. It exposed me to the mental strain placed on NHS employees and the occupational psychologist's work that helps them, including a new wellbeing initiative and a course on understanding stress, which I participated in. Okay, that was quite a wordy sentence, but I've got in NHS, occupational psychology, which is a specific type of psychology to do with helping staff at a company as opposed to external customers or clients. I've emphasized that I participated in the latter, the course on understanding stress. This is something that's quite difficult with work experience at a young age, like below 18, is that you're not given much responsibility. You're effectively just handing out teas and coffees a lot of the time. So if there's anywhere that you actively had a role in, it's important to emphasize that. I also visited the hospital's hypnotherapy department, learning how gut-focused hypnosis can be used to ease patient symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome. Took up a lot of characters with irritable bowel syndrome, actually. And also employee health and wellbeing department. But anyway, I think in both of these sentences, I've emphasized what I've taken away from the work experience. The first one being the mental strain on NHS employees. And the second one, I've learned how gut-focused hypnosis, well, I've learned what it is firstly, but also how it can be used to actually treat symptoms of physical conditions, which is further emphasizing how I believe in psychology's pervasive impact in all different areas of society. So in summary, things you've contributed to the work experience you've done, and also things you've taken away, which doesn't require you to have participated in anything. It's also worth mentioning I got this work experience at the end of year 12, so the summer before my final year of secondary school, which shows that, you know, I'm uploading this in May. It's not too late to get work experience that you can then put on your UCAS personal statement, like right now, if you were hypothetically at the end of year 12. With psychology anyway, you can gain all the experience you need to submit a good UCAS personal statement in probably literally just the preceding year up to your application. Finally, extracurricular activities and conclusion. I'm massively interested in exploring my own mind. Naturally, my main commitment is a daily meditation practice, which has revealed an immense and fascinating difficulty in simply sitting and being. Yes, I'm in my Buddhist era here. I can see meditation being particularly useful in adapting to university life and coping with the workload, as it fosters a sense of equanimity about my experiences. I just learned the word equanimity at the time and I was absolutely gassed with it. It just means like peace through like the peaks and troughs of existence, but not in like a nihilistic psychopath way, just kind of chill. I put meditation at the top of the paragraph because it's the most relevant to psychology, and I've extracted a kind of reflection on why it makes me a better candidate for being accepted onto a given course, because it gives you transferable skills that you can apply to university life. I believe I could be an ambassador for my university based on my experience of giving numerous school tours, including to a shadow minister. She's still shadow minister, Lucy Powell MP? Shadow Secretary of State for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. Nice. I guess the good thing about this sentence, beyond the flex, is that I'm saying I can give back to the university utilizing skills that I picked up in this particular experience. And there's a lot of outreach work, ambassador work for all the universities. I'm thinking I can do your course, but also I can rep your university. And then I move on to like the traditional hobbies. So unfortunately for me, I'm not like county level sports player or grade 8 musician. I thought I'd mention in a very efficient sentence. As for traditional hobbies, I've played tennis, hockey and guitar, but currently engage in drama and singing. Both I find more challenging to improve, but this makes them deeply fulfilling to pursue, and I want to continue doing so at university. I just got out that I have an eclectic set of interests rather than I achieved this in this particular hobby. Because on your UCAS, you can put the grades you achieved in, say, like drama certificates or music certificates. And I didn't want to waste characters by talking about that again. With drama and singing, I've mentioned that they're more challenging to me than the other hobbies, but that's what makes me enjoy them. And I relish a challenge, basically. So I think that's a good skill to show. Being explicit that I want to continue pursuing these at university. I also go running for its benefits to body and mind, especially from being in nature. Again, how are they going to know whether I've just run to the supermarket or I've run a half marathon? They don't need to know. We love nature though. That's class. Overall, I think the extracurricular section isn't something to treat as completely separate from the rest of your application where you're talking about your subject. Try and find ways to link the hobbies and experiences you've gained to the subject and to being a university student. In terms of the conclusion, it's literally just a sentence, but ultimately I believe my mind's potential is best realised at university, where it can study itself. That is the whole of my conclusion, because you don't want to waste characters repeating the same things you've said up to this point. I thought I'd leave them with a powerful, impactful final sentence. Now I've gone through my personal statement with a fine-tooth comb, what is some general advice I can give to you? Not just about psychology, but UCAS personal statements in general. Firstly, as I highlighted in my intro, it is overwhelming to have an empty document. And that applies to writing anything like an essay or a personal statement. Psychologically, I find it a lot easier to edit a document that is already there. I recommend write down every experience you have that could be included on it. It doesn't have to go in, but literally anything that comes to mind, just so there is content on a page that you can then edit into a personal statement and then at the end make it read somewhat okay. In job applications, this is known as a bucket CV. You're just writing down every experience you have that could go on to give you somewhat of a starting point. Secondly, on making it readable, ask for feedback. This personal statement wasn't a solo effort by me. I wrote a first draft and I asked 2 teachers for feedback. I asked my form tutor and I asked the head of sixth form, head of like university applications. I can't remember what her role was, but get a fresh pair of eyes to give you some feedback. Even someone who doesn't know your subject well, how does it read to them? Because if it reads well to them, then there's a good chance it'll read well to an admissions tutor. Don't be ashamed to get feedback as much as you want. Like, teachers are there for you. So literally just keep popping out the drafts. Eventually, you'll be able to look back at your first draft of the personal statement and realize how far you've come along. Don't get too attached to your sentences. I know when I write, I can think I've written the best sentence in the world, and I'll get feedback from someone who says that they don't like the sentence, and it's a real sucker punch because sometimes you just think you're the next George Orwell. Just be willing to experiment and see what comes out. Another way you can improve your personal statement, and I don't know if these resources were available to me back in the day. There are these websites where you can check how readable your personal statement is. This is the Hemingway editor. I've copied and pasted my personal statement in, and it appears it's not very readable. Obviously, this isn't an exact science because it's just done by an algorithm. But if you can get this grade down a little more to like a 9 or so, then it's likely that it reads better than it does if it's a grade 14, which mine was. You can remove some adverbs, you can remove some passive voice, you can split up long sentences. You don't need to use flamboyant language to sound clever. Like, the best writing is actually simple. Remember, there is no perfect personal statement. I've just shown you how imperfect mine is. Don't let anyone sell you an online course to write a personal statement with, or sell you a personal statement mentoring session or something like that. You can get all the feedback and advice you need for free, whether that be from YouTube videos, people that you reach out to on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is hot these days. Make sure your references are good. The personal statement isn't the only piece of the puzzle. There's obviously your grades and references from teachers. So if you have the chance to read the references that your teachers have given you, do not hold back on being willing to change those if they don't paint you in the best possible light. Because I got a B at Politics AS, and the teacher wrote in my reference for UCAS that he was disappointed in that. I was fuming. I was like, you cannot put that in a UCAS application. The word disappointed should not feature. So I got that promptly removed. Finally, give yourself time. Anyone who knows me will kill me for giving this advice because I don't follow it myself a lot of the time. But if you start a piece of work in good time, then it will be far less stressful to finish it. I started writing this personal statement in the summer before, when I hadn't even got all my work experience yet, but just getting ideas down, as I say, means that when you come to giving it a proper crack in like September, October time before you apply, you have a starting point. In summary, punchy introduction with a bit of personal, bit of general motivation in there. Academic experience that you tie back to the subject, you tie back to studying at university, even if you don't think that those things are strictly that relevant. Reading is good to take into account what the university is looking for and what the courses cover, but also what are you personally interested in? Where does your reading take you? Any work experience you have, what have you learned from it? What have you contributed to it? Extracurricular activities, how might they link to your subject? How might they link to university life? What can you give back to the university based on the skills you have and the experiences you have accumulated? That's basically it. So I hope you got some value out of watching this video about my personal statement. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave a comment. Feel free to write to me in the contact form of my website, which I have created and I'm very proud of. It's literally just my photo and contact form. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well if you want me to have a look at your personal statement. The link is on my website. Imagine though, hypothetically, you've applied to Cambridge and a few months down the line you hear back from them. They've offered you an interview. So what do you do? Well, allow me and my friends to tell you what we did in our Cambridge interviews.